Welcome back, everybody. I have another episode of the Fraud Boxer podcast coming at you today. Today, I have Pete Barker at SpyCloud. How are you doing today?
Hey, Jordan, great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, now you and I go way back, and I'm super excited to have you on this today because we have done a lot of events and a lot of panels in the past. So I'm super pumped to have you on here today and get to have this conversation about SpyCloud, about you, about where the industry is, because I think this is a very interesting piece of the industry. We all talk about fraud, we all talk about breaches and ATOs, but we are not in the ones in the weeds ourselves that are doing the work on making these things unknown, where they are happening, where they're coming from, what's happening to the data, and that's something that you guys do. So yeah, thanks again.
Awesome. Well, hey, if I look back, I think we met probably 6, 7 years ago at the MRC back
Yeah,
in the day,
probably.
right?
Yeah, I mean
Early on.
that's a lifetime in this industry.
You're not lying, especially coming out of COVID. It seems like, like 20 years at this point, right?
It really does. Yeah, that's 3 years that it's been since this COVID thing was getting going. It's really like just been like lost time to me. I don't know about to you, but for me, it's like it didn't happen. And then I'll start talking to somebody about something, and they're like, "Yeah, that was like 4 years ago." I'm like, "What?" Feels like it was just yesterday. It's because we've been inside for so long. But yeah, you and I, we've done a number of panels. We've done a number of even the virtual ones too. But yeah, I think we just did one of the most recent MRC, didn't we?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, to your point, I want to say you and I have been shoulder to shoulder at least 3 or 4 times on panels in person and virtual ones as well. And I can't thank you enough, you and
Yeah.
others that helped out this year with the MRC Vegas. It was great to see everybody again this year. It was like, holy smokes, here's my people, and to help out SpyCloud this year, that was awesome. So thank you again.
Yeah, I had a really good time. I think we had a really good group there with Keith on there, and then Diana from Finish Line, who just was on another episode, 2 episodes actually, a couple episodes ago here. So we're getting the whole band back together over here. You and I also, I think, did we were on the Emailage advisory board for a while there too. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember those. I mean, that was a lot of fun back in the day. It was great to be able to connect with industry experts like yourself and others and get into these kind of think tank situations and really look at a product and say, hey, how could we help you all make this better? So that was really fun.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like I've always enjoyed doing advisory boards. I've been on a number of them in the past. I think it's really important for vendors to do a voice of the customer and learn what their users are doing and how their users are using their product to make sure that like they're developing the product in a way that is useful for us to actually be able to use. One of the things that I always make fun of companies that like innovate for the sake just of innovation, not for the sake of usefulness. You'll see like apps on your phone, they'll completely change overnight and you're like, that is not at all how I ever wanted to use this at all. And I think that it's really important to get feedback before you make those changes to make sure you don't eliminate or add additional clicks to something that like the vast majority of your users were using on a daily basis. There's a lot of focus groups, a lot of like software like Full Story and a lot of metrics that you can see how users interact, but there's nothing that beats just getting a bunch of your users in a room, especially at the same time, and just having them spill their guts on how they use the product, what they like about it, and what they hate about it, and taking that criticism, and actually applying it to your future offerings. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, feedback is 100% the right way to go, especially from a solution provider's perspective. Everybody's out there fighting to try to get business today. And when you have a really good relationship or partnership, it should be both sided. It should be two-sided. Hey, what are we doing right? What could we be doing better? So to your point, it's mission critical to have that type of dialogue.
Yeah, it's a whole podcast we could do a whole nother day. I can give you a lot of feedback about companies that you buy something from them and then you never hear from them ever again. They just kind of just go away. And then if you ask them for something, they act like you're bothering them. And I just don't understand companies that do that. But yeah, you and I, we spent a lot of time too at the MRC, like you were mentioning. That's where we spent a lot of time together on these panels and everything. And then I do think that the same thing, getting in a group together of our peers, to talk about the things that we're facing is just doing things like that, getting people in rooms, like that's the theme of this beginning, is getting people in a room is just so valuable, and that's something that was lost over the pandemic.
Boy, I'll tell you, you talk about the MRC. Geez, I mean, I know you and I have stirred up a few at the MRC events in Vegas and some of the local events too. But boy, what a classy organization. And when I look at myself, I was an outsider to the industry. My background, and I know we'll talk more about this, really was a loss prevention practitioner for brick and mortar stores. And that's where I spent most of my time, or the lion's share of my career. And when I got into the fraud space, the first thing I aligned with was with the MRC, because I wanted to meet folks like you and further my relationship with Keith and Debbie and Diana and Mike. I mean, there's just a ton of people I look back and say, my gosh, if it wasn't for you all kind of accepting me in and bringing me into your world, I would have never been successful. And the MRC was really the gateway of
Yeah.
bringing me in and creating those relationships.
And I think that for a lot of people, MRC is that stepping stone into these relationships, into this whole industry. Like they are the industry. Like there's other conferences, there's other events that happen all around us, but I think the MRC is like the one, like the central hub for almost all of us, and it's a really organic organization. I've watched it change multiple iterations over my more than a decade in the industry, and I think that they're focused on education now is pretty interesting to me. I think that that's going to be super useful, but a lot of people, like, that's really where we get involved. I know that's where I got involved. That's where I decided that this was going to be what I did with my life, was be a real huge part of this fraud industry, because I love it so much. But let's talk about you, because this is you, and this is SpyCloud today. And you were kind of segueing there, like, how did you get into fraud? You wound up in LP, then you wound up at the MRC. So let's talk about that. How did it happen?
Well, I'll first start off, I've got over 25 years. I don't want to say 30, because if I say 30, then I feel really, really old. So I'm going to keep on holding on to this over 25 years or over 20-year mantra in this kind of fraud and investigation space. But I'll share something with you that not a lot of folks know. I learned on your podcast that you're a lover of animals, especially giraffes. And not a lot of my friends know that I didn't start off in this career path at all. Matter of fact, um, my career started out as a detective for Kmart when I had a failed career as a Ford auto mechanic. And
I had
people
no
go, come
idea.
on.
Like,
People go,
no clue.
come on. Yeah, like, you're an auto mechanic? And I did that for about 3 years. And I was around cars my entire life. My grandfather was somebody that worked in a steel mill. I grew up in the steel town, and he always had cars at the house. And I'm sticking my head under the hood. What are you doing? I'm helping him lift something. And I just kind of had this general progression to there. I remember working at a Ford dealership in Pittsburgh, and one of the old timers said to me, he said, son, if you could get out of this business, get out, because your body, your mind, your soul, it just eats you alive. And I'm like, really? And then shortly thereafter that, our dealership was sold. I took the layoff, and then I actually went back to Kmart, where I worked in high school, and applied for a loss prevention agent position.
Interesting. So, are you still a car guy?
I still am.
Yeah. What kind of cars do you got right now? You want to talk about them?
Well, I don't have anything currently that's of good mention. I mean, I have a Toyota TRD off-road, but
There you
prior to
go.
that, I mean, I've had a Corvette, I've had a Grand National, Challenger, um, some of the import stuff like a Mercury XR4 Ti turbo. So my
Hmm.
game plan is, once my daughter is graduated from college, to get back into maybe getting another toy like that, but not today.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a toy myself. My first car was a 1970 El Camino that my father had built for me, and it was a lot of fun, having a muscle car be your first car. But right now, I'm trying to decide if I want to place an order for the new 2024 Mustang. They have that new Dark Horse package, and that looks pretty cool. It's like it's supposed to be one of the last V8 ones that they make. I'm not usually big on American muscle cars, but I want something that's kind of loud. I really want one of the Porsche 718 GT4s, but those are like impossible to get an allocation for. So I might as well just not right now and just wait it out while all these dealerships are doing this crazy markup, and you have to have multiple iterations of Porsches before, because I don't. But yeah, I cars are my thing. That'll always be my weakness as far as where I spend my money. I love fast cars.
Well, I think we've all made bad decisions on cars. We've also made some good decisions on cars. Sometimes you
Yeah.
act with emotion, and that's okay. I mean, I've seen so many cool cars over the years, and definitely something I want to go back to for sure.
Yeah, once I hit it big one of these days, I'm gonna have all the Porsches. I'm a little big for Porsche. Like I went and did the Porsche experience, Quantometric, took a bunch of us out to go drive some of those Porsches out at the track in Carson over here in LA. And I once I fold myself into the car and I'm actually in there because I'm 6'4", it's a lot of fun. And I definitely would like to do that more often, but the getting in and getting out as I get older in life would probably be a little more challenging. So, all right. So you were an auto mechanic and then you jumped back into LP. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I did it the old-fashioned way. I started out as a detective, and I had a lot of good guidance of folks that liked me and taught me how to catch people shoplifting, and I became really darn good at it. And as a result of that, I got promoted to a manager position for Kmart, and then I went to a new division that they had at the time that was called Super Kmart. So I got my own staff, a bigger store, state of
Wow.
the art equipment. Did that for about a year. And then I was recruited out of there by my first, I'm going to say, like district level job, if you will.
I bet you if the Super Kmart was now, they would have called it Kmart Plus. Just saying.
I got to tell you, though, it was a lot of fun. When I look back at the companies that I got to work for, like Kmart, and then I was recruited to a small consumer electronics chain here in Pennsylvania or in Ohio called Sun TV. And by the way, we were put out of business by Best Buy in Circuit City.
Oh
But I
no.
also got the I also got to work for companies like Staples, KB Toys, Sears, and then most recently Dick's Sporting Goods. Whenever I was recruited over to there, and that's really when I look at my career, I think of Dick's Sporting Goods as really kind of the tipping point of where I got to do some really, really cool stuff.
Dick's Sporting Goods is super interesting to me. So I said like on my a couple podcasts ago, like when I was being interviewed by Diana, I came from a retail background, and I actually came from the time in retail when it was starting to do the shift to e-commerce from for brick and mortar, and there was a number of the sporting goods stores like that were in existence when during that shift, and a lot of those stores were affected heavily by the movement to e-commerce. But you see like the discount retailers like the big fives and stuff that were making it through, but the larger ones tended to not make it. But somehow Dick's Sporting Goods in the middle of it all were able to maintain their footing and even grow that footing. And to this day, like we have a store over here in Cerritos that I go to, and it's just a massive store. And I like going to that one because they almost always have everything that I ever need in stock. Like I wanted one of the giant solo stoves, like the Yukons, the other day, and sure enough, they had it right there. I tried to go get it at like the Ace Hardware that's like by my house, and they had no idea what I was even talking about, even though like it was literally on their website. So I called Dick's. I had that thing in the back of my car probably 20 minutes after I made that phone call, and I just couldn't believe like that they expanded under that. And like when you go into a store like that, that's one of those stores that when you walk into, you're reminded why you go to retail. It's clean, the displays are cool, there's people everywhere helping out, it smells good. Like that is one of the stores that I think still embodies what we used to like about the department store retail store, when a lot of times you go into these specialty stores in the mall now, it's just to like get you in and get you out. It's not really, there's no sort of experience with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely big on the experience. And I mean, for me, I got to see everything that you just talked about as far as the growth of the organization, especially on the e-commerce side. I was thankfully part of that and got to witness that all. So when I started at Dick's, I was hired there as the manager of investigations. And I was brought on to really kind of stand up the investigations team and put some formalized processes and policies in place for investigations. And I had a lot of fun doing that. Had a very small analyst team, but we put exception-based reporting into play, put refund management into play, and really started going after organized retail crime cases, which the company had never done before. So had some really, really cool experiences that came up during my tenure there, as well as I had an opportunity. I was tapped on my shoulder whenever they said, "Hey, we're going to start up this e-commerce fraud department. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Oh, heck yeah, let's do this. I want my
All
name in the
right.
hat." Yeah.
Yeah, and you were there for quite a while, right? Like
12 years. When, I
12
was there,
years.
yeah, for 12 years.
Wow. So that so you saw all the growth and then you just recently left too, right? Like
Believe it or not, this is so funny how time flies. I literally had my 1 year anniversary at SpyCloud like 2 days ago.
well, congratulations.
No, I'm sorry. It's a little bit longer than that. It was on the 8th. So I made it a year. Here I am.
Yeah, we don't want to give away the magic, but that was today's the 16th, everybody. So 1 year and 8 days, So congratulations on that.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
so now you're at a company called SpyCloud, and I think that we see you guys a lot because you guys have a lot of you're on LinkedIn a lot. You're sharing a lot of useful information. But let's talk about what SpyCloud is.
Okay. Well, you know what, Jordan? When you look at SpyCloud, a couple of things I want to share with everyone is we just had our 6th anniversary. So we've been in business for a little over 6 years. We have a little over 400 customers. And a lot of the tools and things that you interact with, while you may not know that SpyCloud's there, we're actually there in the back helping some of these bigger organizations, whether it's if you're trying to book some travel or if you're logging into a specific site, we could be in the back running our analytics. But what we are is we're the leader in cybercrime analytics. When people look at us, especially law enforcement, we're known as the good guys. And when I made the decision to leave Dick's, one of the reasons why I left was I got recruited over here. I started to talk to the leadership, and I was like, holy smokes, like nobody else is doing what we're doing today.
Interesting. So I think that like you guys, like what I know about you guys is like you guys pull in breach data. So you're looking at the dark web and you're pulling in like downloading all these lists and stuff that are seen. Am I right? I'm in the ballpark there.
Yeah, I mean, so really what kind of separates us, there's many things that separate us from the rest of the pack. The first thing is we have a human intelligence team, which are some of the brightest women and men out there. And what they do is they go on to the criminal underground, the dark web, and they've created these trusted personas. And the bad actors actually give us the breach data. We don't pay for it.
Just give it
And
to.
they give it to us. So many people ask all the time, come on. So these women and men have done this their whole life. They know how to do it. They created these trusted personas. They get in groups where nobody else could get in, and they're trusted. And that's what really makes the difference. One of the differentiators between us and the rest of the folks. And if you were to say, like how big or, what are you guys doing? We're ingesting millions and millions of breach records a week and billions a month. And when you look at our overall breach catalog, we're over 300 billion assets right now. And if you look at the total of how many columns are in that breached assets, there's like 212 columns of different categories of data that we have in or assets that we have in our breach catalog.
Interesting. So you guys actually have people in there all day just going in and pulling lists down, and then you're storing it and you're sorting it and putting it all up, and then companies like myself or other like vendors then are buying that data and adding it to like their, I'm assuming like their accounts, like when people try to log in or sending breach notifications like, hey, you need to change your password, or even locking accounts that they know might be affected by other breaches elsewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that makes us really unique is we're very flexible. We have some very small customers, some medium sized and large customers, enterprise customers, and we really customize what we do for them. So whatever problem they're trying to solve, we're there trying to help them. So if it's a login, if their concern is, let's say, like the loyalty, if there's a sector of business like let's say the loyalty folks, if they're having problems with their reward certificates or their loyalty points being stolen, we could be right at login and say, hey, we see this email, but this password has been breached.
Yeah, I see. I'm really good about not reusing my password. Like I'm really good about it, and I use pretty complex passwords. But every once in a while, there's like those little ridiculous websites that like you're like, why do I even need to have an account for this? And I reuse them on those sometimes. And every once in a while, I'll have to go log into something like that, and it'll be like, you need to change your password because it's been part of a breach. Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I know that's my throwaway password on these throwaway accounts, but it is what it is. But I'm assuming
But
those come from things like you guys.
yeah, and it doesn't stop there. I mean, like one of the things that we do is we don't not only protect the companies, but we protect employees inside of a company. So just kind of think of it the other way, where we're doing kind of an active
Interesting.
directory guardian piece saying, hey, company XYZ, Pete's used this password X amount of times, it's in a breach, you'll want to force that. And then we've got a whole other section or a whole another part of the business that's going after either transactional fraud or just fraud in general. We protect domains. I mean, we're doing a lot of cool stuff over here. And again, that's why I came over here.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that the corporate like the phishing stuff right now is obviously super big. Social engineering everywhere is especially during the pandemic with so many people online that weren't online before. You're starting to see that be the forefront of how people are getting this information. So, I think you mentioned like the phishing, you mentioned the social engineering, you mentioned the breach. Can you elaborate a little bit more, just for the audience, on like how our industry specifically is affected by the things that you guys are looking and trying to stop?
Yeah, for sure. I will tell you, first of all, very few practitioners in our community are talking about this. And I'm talking about breaches and malware and the impact that it can have in that transactional fraud or account takeover. I can tell you, just this year, I go on webinars and WebExes at least once, twice a week, just to hear what's being mentioned. And I have heard recently on a couple podcasts that this malware infected devices as well as breach data can cause you problems. But for a lot of folks, practitioner wise, they get confused. They don't know what to do with this. They don't understand it. And I can raise my hand on that because when I was at Dick's, we did our I was in charge of the fraud strategy, but if we started talking about IT security and malware and account takeover, that went to a different silo.
Yeah.
And this is really where I see it, where the fraud practitioners really got to be in lockstep with the IT security counterparts. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's the way we're going.
That's super interesting. Like I think that, I've said it on this podcast, I've said it on panels, we've talked about it many, many, many times before, is that the silos are difficult. The I mean, even at this company that I'm at now at iHerb, we have my fraud team and then we have a separate security team. Now, granted, we have a pretty good cadence where we talk. We have a couple of like the Google channels that we are chatting in. We have regular meetings where we get together. We say, "What are you working on?" And we say our list. They say their list, which is super great, for getting that done. But it's still it doesn't fix all of the issues that come from having these sorts of things siloed apart. So there's a lot of bleed over, especially on security teams and fraud teams, that people don't necessarily realize. Like ATOs are something that land in both of those courts, and I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's just the siloing is something that I think people need to just really focus and be aware that it's happening, and get those better communications and those better cadences with all of the other teams, and try and set up and schedule regular meetings with your other departments to share what you guys are working on, because I think you'll find a lot of that information is overlapping, and they might even have some tools and toys that you could use, and just you might also have some toys that they could use too. So there's a lot of that goes into sharing these days.
Well, if I could say this much, and I'm sure, you've experienced this time and time again, it's not a lack for trying, because when you're a fraud practitioner, you're being pulled 20 different ways. I'd work directly with customer service. I'd work with the buying team. Then I had the product team. Then I had IT security. And, and again, in my opinion, I think as time goes on, the IT security and fraud practitioner groups have to work closer together, because the practitioners need to understand what happens when a criminal gets their hands on credentials or PII, and how that translates to issues with you, not only just you as an individual, but your potential enterprise. And time over time, we've seen as criminals are getting better and better at tricking people into downloading malicious files, planting malware on their devices, siphoning all their login credentials, browser fingerprints, and also
Yeah.
buying and trading breach data on the underground themselves. I mean, they're giving stuff away. You can go on Telegram and see free stuff.
Yeah, it's we get regular phishing emails sent to us like from our own IT security team, trying to see. And then if you click on it, then you get assigned additional training. But so they just sent one this last week, and it was so blatantly obvious, like we were laughing about it. But hey, I'm sure somebody clicked on it. I'm sure somebody did. It had a PDF in it and everything. That's funny. So let's get into the weeds a little bit. So you guys have all this data, and it's great that you have all this data, but what you're gleaning from it is going to be like what's really useful. And I think that to my listeners specifically, like we talk about all these high level things, but I think I like to get into the weeds so people can actually hear real numbers and hear how it's being seen across the industry and possibly and probably is resulting in real attacks on their own specific websites as well. So what are you guys specifically seeing, and can you give me any numbers around that by chance?
Yes, for sure. Well, I don't think it's any secret. ATO is
Oh,
increasing. I think just about every podcast or webinar that I've been
yep.
on or white paper that I've read, ATO is off the charts. And when you look at the ATO attacks, there's been about a 307% increase between 2019 and 2021. And it's a hot topic
Jesus.
today. It's huge. And ATO losses increased 90% in 2021, totaling about $11.5 billion in losses.
I will say, like, we were talking, we were doing the panel, I think in back in March, and everybody is tired of hearing about ATOs because they thought that we had all solved ATOs, 5, 6 years ago when we first started talking about it. And I had been screaming, probably actually even since the September before, that like ATOs are back with a vengeance. And they still are. Like I'm still seeing ATO attempted activity on my site. And I saw that there was a big post floating around even recently. And I think I texted you late one night because there was a massive list that was happening somewhere that was hitting all of our sites on ATOs, all on a Wednesday, all at once, across the entire e-commerce industry. Everybody was seeing it. So do not sleep on ATOs, people. Like it is not done. You did not solve it. I don't care what you have on your website. You didn't solve it. It's back. It's not going away. And it's going to keep hitting harder and it's going to keep growing. And there is a new massive breach every single day that's only going to contribute to the problem. Like this is low hanging fruit for fraudsters. It's easy to try and get into an account and monetize an account. Everybody's sharing passwords. Everybody's doing the same email across everything. So you got to watch your site. You got to like double and triple protect yourself, man. This is one of the big ones.
Well, I will tell you, if you think about it, it is really easy and super cheap for criminals to get their hands on breach data and log into your credentials and take over your account. I mean, that's a fact. So if you don't have something that prevents that from happening, you're just going to
Yeah.
be spinning your wheels time after time.
And a
And
lot
then
of
once
people don't like a lot of people don't like to use 2FA, and a lot of websites don't even enable it. I mean, look at Twitter even took it away the other day. Like, yeah.
well, look, multi-factor authentication is a safeguard. We also know that it's not bulletproof, but it's better than nothing. Okay. And, criminals, once they get your information, they're going to update that account in the settings or the notifications, and they're in and they look like a legitimate customer. And you're not going to get your updates anymore because they changed an email, and it's lights out after that point. You're done. It's over. And then hopefully on, the practitioner side, do you have the right tools in play to detect this? If not, you're not going to like your chargebacks as a result of that.
Yeah. And it's like I mean, I've been on other sites too that I've worked for that like the value of getting into an account wasn't even transacting with the stored credentials. It was what was stored inside the account, transferring things away like tickets or stored rewards currency, like stored gift cards, things like that. Like you got to understand that like sometimes the value of your account isn't necessarily making another transaction. It's what's stored inside the account itself. So
Well, just to throw another number out there as we're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, we know that 20%, 24% of all victims of ATO fraud had their contact information, such as an email address or phone number, changed after an ATO incident. So we know that. I mean, that's based on the industry and that's based on, um, you know, the data that's out there. And look, I mean, I'm guilty of this just like everybody else is. We love saving our payment information in our accounts because it's a pain in the rear end
It
to
is.
grab your credit card. But you know what? When you look at what we do, you may say, well, what's the difference between you, SpyCloud, and the other players out there? SpyCloud is different from your traditional identity verification or anti-fraud solutions. We're going deep into that criminal underground, as I said earlier, with our human intelligence teams to collect that breach data and malware data from offline groups as part of their trusted circle. So if you think of this as layers, you know, when you look at the dark web or the criminal underground, the first layer is the surface, and that's where a lot of public stuff is. It's commodity data, it's cheap, it's passed around. Then you get to that middle layer, and that's, it takes a little bit more savvy and expertise. That's for vetted forms, and the data becomes unstructured and clumsy. And then there's the core layer, which that's where we're known for, SpyCloud, and that's where we get like the most valuable data from that core layer. So when you're looking at us, we do some scraping out there, but the lion's share of what we get is from our human intelligence team. We curate it. We throw out about 60% of all the data that we ingest every week because
Oh,
it's duplicate data. We
yeah.
already have it in our database. And we're also known in the industry as the first to get the data. So a lot of times when we post our breach data, and we do that every week, you'll see somebody else will post it 6, 7, 8 months later, and we've already posted it in our breach catalog, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty good to be ahead of it, Like that's why I usually, if I'm trying to figure out what's happening on my own side, I'm usually texting you, to see if you're seeing anything. I suppose I should probably be paying for that one of these days, but I think we're heading down that path right now, it seems. Uh yeah, this is super interesting. I think like just to go back real quick and touch on one of the things, like you said, the ATO, like the account information has changed afterwards. You see a lot of websites these days, a lot of people in like the fraud and abuse prevention side, monitoring when things are changed after login. So they'll go to they'll have another fraud check at like email change or or payment method change or name change on the account. I think there's sites that used to have that happen. It was a lot more frequently. Like Blizzard with their old World of Warcraft accounts. All the Clash of Clans people and stuff like that. But that was for different purposes, where people were reselling accounts. These ones are people that, trying to full on like take over an aged account to do nefarious things with it. So definitely very interesting. And it's good to know like you guys are deep in the deep, instead of just grabbing the easy, the low hanging fruit, like I always say on the surface level stuff, because I think a lot of us can fire up a Tor browser and jump onto a website and grab some old stale breach data out there, So what else are you guys seeing?
Well, we see, you brought it up earlier, a very, very high use of password reuse in our database, making people prime targets for credential stuffing attacks. It's funny, 70% of the individuals are using the same credential
Ooh,
combinations across their accounts. And we see that. And
70%?
yeah, we're terrible at it. I mean, look, I'm going to be completely straight up with you. Prior to coming to SpyCloud, it was a pain in the neck. I mean, at work in my previous
Yeah.
company, we had a password manager, so you had to use specific passwords, and they forced the reset. But in
Yeah.
my home life, my password hygiene was terrible. It's
You gotta
much
use
better now.
Bitwarden. Bitwarden's free. And it's got Chrome extensions. It's got a iOS app. I think you're an Android guy, aren't you? If I'm not mistaken.
No,
Um,
I'm an Apple guy. I'm an
okay,
Apple
good.
guy.
Okay, good. All right. Whew. Yeah, but
Yeah.
Bitwarden, man, I use that for both personal and for my work stuff too, and it makes it nice and easy. They have a little thing that they can generate a number for you too, but like Google's pretty good about generating a crazy password. So yeah, but 70% of individuals using the same combo and same password. I used to at another company I worked at, we would obviously hash and salt the passwords, but we would still get the hash of what that password would be, and we would take like the ones we would run queries and look at for hashes that were the same, and then just run an account to see like how many random accounts would have the same password, and it was shocking sometimes. And I'm assuming it would be the ones that were the people that were probably using something like password one or password 1%. But it was shocking to like you would get like 50 to 100 accounts each day that were using the same exact like password. So in some way, shape, or form. I couldn't see what it was, but we could just see that it was the same as these other 50 accounts had.
Well, talking about passwords in general, I mean, we have one of the most sophisticated password cracking systems in the world. I mean, we can crack 90% of all passwords into plain text, and that's really the magic behind. We could see the password reuse, and we could see what's
Nice.
going on to say, hey, you all need to fix this, or we can make suggestions. Do you want to put that account into review? Do you want to force a change? And again, it's all based on the tolerance of risk based on the potential client. Some folks don't want any friction in there, which we get that. And other folks are like, oh no, we're not letting that one go.
So I think we talked a little bit about multi-factor and 2FA stuff. Yeah. What are you seeing around that? You just mentioned it. Yeah. And I think we all know things like SIM swapping and all that is a thing these days.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing activity around session hijacking. Multi-factor authentication is not a silver bullet, as most would think. I mean, criminals are selling logins, browser sessions, and some of them give them away free cookie sessions on criminal marketplace. Some of these criminal marketplaces are just a Google search away. I mean, it's not like you have to be the savvy IT person, and they're giving specific instructions on how to use the
Yeah.
browsers, as well as they're really cheap. I mean, and they come with guarantees. So they're like, hey, for $1, we'll give you this. For $2, we'll give you this. And some of them give away free cookie sessions that if you just dumped it into a browser, you could log into somebody's account, which is crazy.
Yeah, that was something that we were super aware of at the ticketing company I worked at. The Fast is people trying to manipulate cookies. So we were pretty hyper aware of that, especially for people that are in queue, trying to get like high demand tickets. You'd see people doing all sorts of crazy stuff, trying to manipulate a cookie, thinking it would work. Like, thankfully, we were ahead of the curve there on that one, and we're aware that those things were going on. So had things in place on that one there. Yeah, you said like credentials for $1. You got any idea how much things actually cost on there? You can give us examples.
Well, I mean, we're seeing anything from $1.50 to $375 for hospitality reward points, $100 for a bank login. But in that bank login, they're guaranteeing you're going to get $1,000, crazy stuff like that. $2 for streaming sites. And then, as I said before, some of these cookies or browser sessions are free. And, there's a whole different ecosystem for these criminals. And it's funny, as I said earlier, they offer some level of customer support. So if the criminal has a hard time with the credentials or using the anti-detect browsers, they guarantee what they're selling you, which is pretty wild. They're really concerned about having a good rating for what they're selling.
Wow. So they are basically setting up their own entire actual business on there, which is kind of
Yeah,
funny. Why didn't they just start a legitimate business to begin with?
I don't know. It's pretty wild though.
Wow. So that's a lot of information there that you guys are seeing there. So what are you guys doing for us? Like what do you guys do with the information for us? Like what do we what do we do? What do we get from this? Like what do the merchants get?
Yeah, so I think when you look at us again, I mean, we're different than any other traditional identity verification tool out there because they don't have the visibility into the underground risk associated with their customers. And that's really, and look, I've used all the other ones and they're all good, but they don't do what we do. And that's a lot of times causes confusion. So, we're doing the best job that we can to educate our customers, educate folks through webinars or WebExes like this to say, hey, look, this isn't a knock on the other guys. We're doing something completely different than they are because our underground data is only ours. Nobody else has it. We don't buy the data, and that's what makes us unique. And then we also have infected malware We could tell you if a device was infected with malware because of the bot log informations that we put in. If the passwords were recently exposed, if criminals have their plain text passwords. I mean, that's what makes us so unique and different from what everybody else is doing.
Really interesting there. So for me as a merchant, so I plug you in and you'd be like, hey, this account has had this done, or this device that's trying to log in right now has malware on it. You should probably shut her down, like those sorts of things, right?
We can definitely do that. I mean, with our SpyCloud Identity Risk Engine, we launched that earlier this year. And what we do is when you pass us off an email or a phone number, or a combination of both, we give you a risk score, which is low, medium, high. And a lot of people are like, oh God, another risk score, just what I need. But look, we not only give you a risk score, we're giving you up to these 24 key risk indicators from our breach catalog. And we're working through that now to do some customization around, hey, if this is a e-commerce business, is there anything else in our breach catalog that they would want? If this is a financial institution, is there something that they want that's different? Because again, like I said before, Jordan, we have over 200 lines or 200 segments of breach status. Some of the stuff is not very useful in the fraud world, like, hey, do you have an air conditioner or not? But you would definitely want to know if somebody's social security number was breached, their data, how many date of births are associated with the person, how many emails are associated with this identity, how many phone numbers, when was the most recent breach, is it being sold, on a different commodity or a listserv, as well as, how many other phone numbers are associated or date of birth. So when we're building this all together, we're curating this all through our SpyCloud Identity Risk Engine. We're giving you the risk score, and then we're giving you these up to 24 key risk indicators. So it's up to you. Do you want both? Do you want action on one or the other, or both? And it really is powerful stuff. It can help. It can help in the world of fraud. It can help reduce manual reviews. I mean, this is the benefit of this, and let those good orders go through. It's just not about fraud all the time, catching it. It's also about getting those good orders through.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have like some step up additional data sometimes doing manual reviews that you could just automatically step up in, and that way you don't have to actually manually review it. You could probably just pass it on. I've used different step up like identity tools for years and years and years. Talked about that on some of the identity podcasts we've done here. The loyalty fraud thing I think is something that's really hitting a lot of people right now. Like a lot of websites had a lot of customer acquisition offers that happened during COVID, and then a lot of people tried to exploit those, make multiple accounts and all those things. Yeah. So,
well, if I could jump in there real quick on the whole loyalty piece, that was something that I battled with for, 6 years at my previous company. And what we would find is somebody would set up a scorecard account. You're familiar with Dick's. And after you spend $300, you would get these reward points. And then sure enough, the person would go log into their account. They would get the notification and email, hey, your reward certificate's ready. They would build a cart. They would go to use the reward certificate, and it was gone. And they would be furious. And the first thing they would say is, you guys were hacked. And we were like, no, we weren't hacked. You start talking to them, you have dialogue, and then you find out that they're sharing the password. They were part of another breach. And then the criminal just came in and hit their Citibank, hit their Dick's Sporting Goods
stuff.
And
that's
next
what
thing,
like they people never understand that like the site that they're being used on is not the site that the stuff came from. But the customer always thinks because somebody logged into their account with their stupid password and their first last name at gmail.com, that it's that site that has weak security. Well, no, bro, it's like your shit got like taken somewhere else, and it's just because you used it across all these sites. Now they're all being hit. And yeah, we can help you out by adding 2FA in, but do you want to then have to go grab your phone and get a buzz on your phone saying, hey, hit this button here or solve this CAPTCHA or do this and that? Like, no, you screwed up by having password 1 as your damn password. That's what happened on every site.
Well, I can tell you, and I'm sure you can, I'm preaching to the choir on this one. Nobody wants to add more friction into the flow of especially when it comes to loyalty points. You want to make it so easy that it's a seamless process, but that also starts the problems. And what I've seen is two things in this market: reuse of passwords and then malware on a device. If I could just touch on something very quickly, in my previous company, we would go through those gyrations. The person would go to redeem their reward certificates, and customer service would do the right thing. They'd reload them onto their account, and the person would be like, "Hey, I'm going to come back later and make that purchase." When they came back later, their points were stolen again, and they're mad as a hornet now. They call in, "What's going on here?" And you could draw the conclusion at that point, you got malware on your device, and they
Yeah.
just
Keyloggers. Yeah.
keylogger
Yeah.
the back, man. And I got some more points to use.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's just wild, like all these things that we have to do to like save customers from themselves, and granted there's the bad guys on there, but like just people clicking on websites trying to get the best deal, just infecting their computer with computer aids. It's just so much these days. And
It's a
we
lot.
yeah, and like we try to do things like we add all these software in to try and help out, and you see like banks are, I think, the most in your face example. Like if you log into your online banking from your home, usually you don't get any friction, but then you go and you're like, let's say you're at the office for the first time and you log into your bank, then you get like, hey, let me send you a text message or give you a call. I was just on a cruise ship for a couple of days, and it got used to me checking my bank account on the cruise ship IP address. So now when I'm at home, now it's trying to 2FA me at home every time until it relearns that. But yeah, it's just all these different things, which I appreciate it, but still can be annoying. At this point, it's like the third time I've logged into my bank. I'm like, hey, are we good to go yet? Like, it's me. It's back on my home one.
Well, you know as well as I do, retail's not there yet. And this was a battle that I tried to fight for years, that people are getting more used to these multi-factor authentication scenarios. When I log into my account for bank, I have it set up. It takes a second. It gives me another layer of protection. I feel good about it. It's not a silver bullet, but it makes you feel good. But retail's just not there yet. And there's going to be some challenges because you're going to continue to fight these battles around points and rewards. And,
Yeah.
we look at that as cash. That's cash for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And it should be looked at that. It should be like, just like gift cards. We always tell people you got to treat that as cash. Like you can't be fast and loose. Like your gift card gets stolen, that's on you. That ain't on me. So I think what we're going to do here as we wrap this up, we're actually going to talk about what do you guys have coming down the road? Like what's coming down the road from SpyCloud? And then I'm going to come back and ask you what the those top 3 things that are happening in your world to finish her out. So what's coming down the road for SpyCloud right now?
So we're in the process of making updates to the current products that we have. So like our SpyCloud Identity Risk Engine, we're making some updates to that. And we're going to continue to iterate on that based on the feedback of our clients and our customers. And every time that we do a demo or a POC, we get more information based on feedback. So we're going to continue to do that, and then talk about exposing or making part of the total scoring some of the other attributes or data points that we have in our breach catalog. And then the second thing is, we're exploring new ways to help businesses prevent ransomware. There's going to be more to come on that in the upcoming months. And I
Excellent.
would love to come back, next year and talk more about that
Yeah.
when the time is right. But that's, some of the things that we're working on today.
I think that ransomware thing is pretty interesting. We just had like the LA Unified School District just got hit with a ransomware attack, I believe like a month or 2 ago. But those hospital ones that happened in 2017, that was just a massive deal. I think ransomware is something that is really interesting, and there hasn't been a good solve for that just yet. So definitely, when you guys get a little further down the road there and you're ready, let's have another conversation about that. So now to the end, the big 3. What are the big 3 that are happening in your world and why? I think we already talked about one of them.
Yeah, and we may have talked about 2 of them, but just, if I can't stress this enough, poor password hygiene. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you're spending time and using different passwords, using difficult to break passwords. And again, as I said earlier, 70% of password reuse rate on breached accounts, and people are still it's making them an easy target for ATO. The session hijacking piece is something that continues to grow, and we've got solutions to help anybody that's interested with that. That's a little different and out of the while it could lead to fraud, it's kind of a different conversation around fraud. And then obviously for everyone on the call, depending on when you'll hear this broadcast, you got holiday season coming up in peak season. We've already seen criminals advertising 50% off, and I can't make this stuff up. 50% off Black Friday sales on credentials. So be
Jeez.
prepared. Be prepared, practitioners. The
Yeah.
criminals are ramping up for the holidays, and they're coming after you guys.
Yeah. Now this episode will come out after Black Friday, but just barely after Black Friday. So everybody be aware that those people that took advantage of that sale now have those credentials and they're coming after you. So lock your websites down. And I think all of us, that's a good segue as we finish this. We are coming up on the holidays, everybody. Those are the busiest time of year for the vast majority of us that are in the e-commerce space. It's going to be crazy. Your teams are going to be busy. Your managers and your SLT is going to be begging you to get those orders out the door like faster than ever before. So I feel sorry for you all. I'm there with you guys. This is my first time doing e-commerce in the holiday season because I've ticketing that I've historically done is always runs a slightly different type of busy season. Usually it's in the summer. So I'm going to be in the trenches with you guys this year. So Godspeed to all of us as we go through this. And I hope everybody has a very prosperous holiday season. And Pete, I want to thank you again. Thank you for coming on here. I know we were trying to get this one nailed down for a while. A lot of craziness. I was getting sick, then I had to go on vacation. So thank you for bearing with me as we go through and got this on the books. And then we did this. We got it done. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling great, and I can't thank you enough. You've always been a really great friend and an ally, somebody I could lean on to get advice or
You as well.
direction. And it's great to be part of this community that we're involved in. So if I could just say to all the folks out there, good luck during the holiday season. Did it many years. I know what you folks are going through. Just be vigilant, and it's only about a 2.5 week period now. So
Yeah.
you all make it. I know you will.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on here, and we'll talk to you next time.